You need to stop calling Homelander a psychopath. You're missing the point and the actual far more disturbing diagnosis. Calm, calculating, and completely unfazed by what anyone thinks. Now that's a psychopath. And that's not Homelander. Sure, the man's vaporized the commercial jet, lasered the guy's head off, and has a disturbing thing for mother figures. But all said and done, Homelander still doesn't fit the profile of a psychopath. Now don't get it twisted. He's absolutely unhinged, and there's something wrong with him.
Ashley! Look at me!
Sorry.
It's just not in the way most people think. Because what Homelander has is far darker, messier, and way more explosive than classic psychopathy. But does it have anything, and I mean absolutely anything, to do with his obsession with milk? Homelander was introduced as this perfect all-American superhero who could do no wrong. He's the leader of the Seven, the poster boy of VOD International, and the literal face of a billion-dollar superhero industry that controls politics, entertainment, and pretty much everything else on the planet. He's blonde, blue-eyed, with a realtor smile, and the United States flag for a cape in case anything was lacking.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Altogether, Episode 1 had fans believing he was just a certain Kryptonian superhero knockoff in this universe. If anything, we really thought A-Train was the bad guy for running through literally Yui's girlfriend and really starting his character arc. And the Deep, he's just too busy being a sleaze to hide it. Anyone and everyone with even a smidge of power was a bad guy, except for, of course, Homelander. Well, that image went down just as quickly as the mayor of Baltimore's plane. The boys didn't waste much time in getting right to it. They're all evil, and Homelander's the worst of them. Still, you can't help but just feel the tiniest bit of sympathy for the guy, especially when we get to see his life through flashbacks. He was raised to be a test subject, injected with Compound V as a baby, and given affection only, and only when he outperformed an endurance test. Dr. Jonah Vogelbaum, the only father figure he ever knew growing up, didn't really love him. He just loved the idea of him. And that idea was a successful experiment, not a person. So, does that justify the horrible things Homelander has done? Not really. But that just proves he's not a psychopath. Psychopathy has a pretty strong genetic component, and Homelander craved love enough that he would put himself through all of those tests 10 times over just to make Vogelbaum proud. To his credit, Vogelbaum did regret what he'd done.
You should have been raised in a home with a family who loved you, not in a cold lab with doctors.
But it was only after he'd created a subject with godlike supernatural powers who craved being the good guy.
I don't make mistakes. I'm not just like the rest of you. I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I'm better. I am better!
And that's another reason why he isn't a psychopath. Homelander's kryptonite isn't a glowing green stone. It's people disliking him. You'd think he's heard of the old sticks and stones expression, but Homelander's actually very, and I mean very, particular about maintaining the all-American good guy image, to the point where he deluded himself into thinking that people who call him a good guy, the best actually, when he's standing there threatening their lives, actually mean it. It's the sort of weird and unhinged behavior that makes the boys worth every second, right? But if Homelander isn't a psychopath, then what is he? Well, he's a narcissist, he has antisocial traits, he's obviously paranoid, and he's definitely sadistic. Altogether, Vought's perfect soup has malignant narcissistic personality disorder. It's not a part of the DSM-5's official diagnosis, but rather it's a clinical term that blends everything that's wrong with Homelander. And it's actually worse than being just a psychopath. This would be a lot easier to explain with an example. So, for instance, Soldier Boy is a psychopath.
You're a fucking disappointment.
While Homelander isn't. You'd think that the soup doesn't fly away too far from the tree, right? But they've both been raised in different environments. We don't really know much about Soldier Boy's origin story, just everything after he was defrosted. But we know a ton about what it was like for Homelander growing up. Something that really stuck out to everyone besides a toddler being experimented on, was that one scene where he's being told about Thanksgiving. Homelander reached over to the woman because he genuinely wanted to know what it was like to feel loved. He reacted the way any kid would have when they felt affection from a mother. But the thing is, he wasn't just any kid. And if that wasn't damaging enough, the experimenters basically told him this incredibly traumatic event was nothing to worry about. They told him they'd get him another teacher by tomorrow. Like humans were all expendable anyway. Soldier Boy and Homelander are both violent, dangerous, and emotionally destructive, but they sit on opposite sides of the psychological spectrum. Soldier Boy doesn't chase admiration, he expects it.
Buddy, you think you look strong? You're wearing a cape. You're just a cheap knockoff.
Meanwhile, Homelander chases external validation. When crowds cheer him, he literally feeds off of it, and when they boo him, he unravels. And in that moment, it really doesn't matter that he lives in the tallest skyscraper around and literally looks down on them every single day. It just takes him back to when he was a kid under extreme isolation, when he was craving validation and being used like a guinea pig over and over again. If he performed well on a test, he'd get a smile. But if he didn't, then the scientists would just look at each other confused. While they went back to discuss how to fix Homelander, they left the boy alone in a creepy cell to think about what he'd done wrong and why he wasn't good enough. Okay, but that was all seen in flashbacks. In the present day The Boy's timeline, Homelander is the soup. He's well liked, he's all American, and he's definitely the strongest one out there. At this point, he doesn't really have anything left to prove, and he has Vought's PR team behind him to make him look even better. So why does he still care so much about what anyone else thinks? Homelander has an exaggerated sense of self-importance and superiority to the point of delusion. That's grandiosity, and it goes beyond confidence and overconfidence, entering into blasphemous territory. To be fair to Homelander, he does have the sort of abilities that would classify him as a godlike being anyway, which makes it a bit confusing why he'd need anyone, especially people who can't even lift a car with one hand telling him he's God when he knows he's already better than them. So, grandiosity is relative. Homelander doesn't just want to stand on top of Mount Everest, he wants a whole crowd down there to look at him, cheer him on, and remind him that he's achieved something that they can't even dream of. Now that we've covered the fact that he craves attention and would do anything for it, and then come his antisocial tendencies. Besides just the fact that he lacks empathy, you've probably noticed that Homelander cannot for the life of him hold a conversation with anyone if it doesn't involve either threatening their lives or if it's off script from what Vought's programmed him to learn. It's as if he's not telling you how the 4th of July is his favorite holiday or turning you into a firecracker. He just can't really ask you how your day's been. Remember what he did to Madeline Stillwell in the season 1 finale? Madeline was someone we thought he actually cared about, maybe the only person on the show that he would think twice over before obliterating them. That didn't end up being the case, and once again, he just thought she was another disposable human being. He toyed with her just enough to make her think that she'd be making it out of there alive. And then, well, he shot her through with his laser beams. The only reason she's made it further than most people who've crossed Homelander have is because she has something else to offer him. And this would be a great segue into talking about his obsession with milk and getting it directly from the source. So yes, it is more than just being overly enthusiastic about milk and a lot sadder than just having a weird fetish. In Wisdom of the Ages, Homelander goes back to the lab he was born in. And that's where he meets Barbara. She tells him that his constant need for approval was deliberately fed into him as a child. When the experimenters realized Homelander could end them if he wanted to, they found another way to control him. And that's to make him crave their attention so bad that he'd want to keep them around.
We couldn't have stopped you, but you didn't. Because you couldn't stand the idea that we would be disappointed in you.
Madeline fed into that by cradling and caressing him and making him feel like he was her special little boy. And it was something that just worked for him. And yes, he might have been the one to shoot a laser through her skull, but he ended up trying to find a replacement for her anyway. Anyway, All of this should tell you that Homelander isn't a psychopath. He's actually something much worse. Everything he does, from the violence to the theatrics to the breakdowns, comes from a place of craving. Craving of love, approval, and the comfort he was denied from the moment he was born in a lab. That's what makes him dangerous. Not the powers, but the emotional void behind them. So yes, Homelander can level a city, but the thing that controls him is something much sadder, and it's approval. It fits with the clinical diagnosis of NPD, and combining it with his sadism, antisocial tendencies, and everything else that's wrong with him, malignant narcissistic personality disorder. But let us know what you think. Do you think Homelander's worse than a psychopath? Comment down below.